my channel. My name is Kira and I'm a second year university student studying nutrition. I not only love to cook and bake, but I love to understand the science behind it as well. One of my goals is to formulate some signature cookies that I'm known for, but to do that I do need to better understand the science behind the cookies and how each ingredient impacts the final product. And honestly, there's no better way to learn than by doing, so today we're going to be making 4 different recipes of double chocolate chip cookies to examine the impact of ingredients and ingredient ratios. I hope baking these recipes serves as useful research that I can draw on when I'm trying to formulate my own cookie recipe. So I've got all 4 of my recipes printed out, and I've either halved them or quartered them just to make it more accessible and because things are expensive. And what I find interesting about these recipes is that all of them have the same amount of butter and flour, but the differences between all of the other ingredients is what will determine each cookie. For the recipes, we've got one from Sally's Baking Addiction, we've got one from Broma Bakery, we've got one from an author named John Cannell, and one from All Recipes. To preface, I do have a basic understanding of what each ingredient does in a baked good, thanks to a course I took in my first year. So let's review. Flour provides the majority of the structure in the cookie. Butter is a carrier for flavor, it impacts texture, and it controls how much the cookie spreads. Sugar, whether it's brown or white, impacts the texture and the browning of the cookie. Eggs provide structure, they add moisture, and they help the cookie rise. And of course, baking soda is what makes the cookie rise the most. We're starting off strong with Sally's Baking Addiction. We've got her double chocolate chip cookie recipe right here. If you've ever searched for a recipe to make anything, you've most likely seen her website. Such a reliable website, and I've used her recipes many times, so I'm very hopeful these turn out well. Next up, we've got the recipe from Broma Bakery. I don't have any experience with the website myself, but I've seen the brand a lot on TikTok. This recipe is highly rated, but only from 48 reviews, so we'll have to make it and see. And I'm definitely curious about this recipe because it's the only one out of the 4 that uses espresso powder. Third, we're gonna make the cookies from John Cannell. It has great reviews, so I'm excited to see what makes it so special. And lastly, we're testing out the recipe from All Recipes. All Recipes is another website that carries hundreds, if not thousands, of recipes. I know I've used this site many times. Interestingly, this recipe is the only one that calls for margarine instead of butter. I'm curious to see how that will impact our final product. As per my research, cookies baked with butter usually have a crispier edge and a soft, chewy center, while cookies baked with margarine tend to be softer, but can sometimes feel slightly drier. This recipe starts by creaming the butter and sugar until light and fluffy. I used my hand mixer and it took about 4 minutes. This is a step I usually rush when baking, so I was curious to see whether taking the extra time would make a difference. Once the mixture was fluffy, I added the egg and vanilla extract and mixed until combined. In a separate bowl, I whisked together the flour, cocoa powder, baking powder, and salt before gradually adding the dry ingredients to the wet mixture. Once the dough became too thick for the mixture, I switched to a spatula. Finally, I mixed in the milk and chocolate chips. The finished dough was extremely sticky, much stickier than I expected. I packed it into a container and left it to chill overnight. The Broma Bakery recipe used only brown sugar, but the butter to sugar ratio was almost identical to Sally's. I found it much easier to combine, and the mixture looked noticeably fluffier. After mixing in the egg and the vanilla, I noticed that the recipe didn't call for combining the dry ingredients separately. Instead, I added them directly to the wet mixture before folding in the chocolate chips. Out of all the 4 recipes, this one was by far the easiest to make. The dough was also much less sticky than Sally's. I packed it into a container and left it to chill overnight. John Cannell's recipe followed a similar process. Combine the butter and sugars, add the egg and vanilla, then incorporate the dry ingredients. One difference was that the recipe called for sifting all of the dry ingredients together first to remove any lumps and create a smoother dough. After gradually mixing the dry ingredients into the wet mixture, I folded in the chocolate chips. This dough was incredibly soft and luscious, almost like chocolate frosting. I packed it into a container and left it to chill overnight. The All Recipes recipe started by combining together margarine and sugar, which created a noticeably lighter and smoother mixture than all the recipes before it. After adding the egg and the vanilla, I combined the dry ingredients separately before mixing them into the wet ingredients. Even after all the dry ingredients were incorporated, the dough still seemed far too wet. It wouldn't hold its shape or come together into cookie dough the way the others had. I added the chocolate chips anyway and transferred it into the fridge, hoping the dough would firm up overnight. It's the next day and the doughs have been in the fridge overnight, and now it's time to bake. Bake Sally's cookies first. This cookie dough was super sticky when I first made it, but now it has hardened up and become easier to handle. I've got 40 grams of dough here, which is what Sally recommends, and I've got 2 of them ready to go in the oven at 350. And she recommends 11 to 12 minutes, but I'm putting on a timer for 9 minutes just now. My timer is done, so let's check on the cookies. It says to bake them until the edges appear set and the center still looks gooey, and I would say these look pretty set. I'm gonna let those set on the tray for a few more minutes. This is what they look like, and it smells so good in here. Next up, we got the dough from Broma Bakery. This dough has hardened up a lot in the fridge as well because of the butter inside of it, and the recipe says to do 2-ounce scoops. Here they are, and they're also going to go in the oven at 350, and they're going to go in for around 10 minutes. Setting my timer, 10 minutes. Okay, it's been 10 minutes. Let's check on the cookies. My eyes are watering. The recipe says to bake them until the edges are set but the centers are still gooey, and I think that is what I'm seeing. So it says to let them sit on the cookie sheet for 10 minutes after. So I'm just gonna put them right here and let them continue to bake on the sheet. Like, look how good these look. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes. Let's transfer them. Next up, we've got John's cookies. And I will be bumping up the temp to 375 for the remaining recipes because both of them require 375. Just like all the others, this dough also hardened up in the fridge. And I remember this dough being super smooth when I made it. And this recipe says we're going to need 1.5 tablespoon size balls of dough. So I'm going to have to figure out how to measure that properly. These ones are tiny. All right, and now I've got John's. These are going to be going in for 10 minutes at 375. There's still 2 minutes left, but I am going to pull them out early because they do look like they're done. It does say to only bake them until the edges are firm and the center looks dry, which it does. And now they're going to cool on the sheet for 5 more minutes. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes. Let's transfer them over. Lastly, we've got the All Recipes dough. This one was the one that genuinely looked like frosting, and it tastes like frosting, but I'm not sure how it's gonna bake. It only says to use a tablespoon of dough for each cookie, so I'm very intrigued and concerned. Okay, so I've got the dough from All Recipes in the pan. These are gonna be going in the oven for about 10 minutes, but I'll keep an eye on them and see if they're ready sooner. I have no idea what these will look like. It's time to pull the cookies out. I had a little peek. Good news is that all the cookies are done. Bad news is that the last ones were quite tragic and it was definitely hard to transfer them over, but we did it. There's quite a stark difference between the first three and then the last ones. I left the center a bit gooey, but I definitely think there was too much margarine in there because this is what happens when you have too much butter or fat in a cookie. But I'm happy about these three. Okay, the cookies are all baked, so now it's time to taste them. First up, we've got the double chocolate chip cookies from Sally's Baking Addiction. And these ones have a really nice rise to them. They've risen up really well. And I love the little cracks they have. It's just a very like visually perfect cookie. Let's break it open. Let's take a bite. Wow, that's really good. It's super chocolatey, but I think that the flavor of the cookie itself is actually pretty intense. It has a really nice intense chocolate flavor, and the outside it has a really nice like crackly top, but the inside is like really thick, but it's not chewy. It's like crispy on the outside and a nice like gooey texture on the inside. It's really, really good. I'll give it like a solid 9 out of 10. I can't think of any way to make this better, to be honest. I might even go up to 9.5 because that's a really good cookie. Next up, we've got the cookie from Roma Bakery. This one is a lot wider and it is thicker than this one. If you compare the sizes, like this is Sally's, this is Broma's. This one is lighter as well. This one has a very dark, almost black color on it, and this one has a really nice like chocolatey brown color on it. Let's break it open. Texture wise, this one has the same crispy outside, and it looks to be quite gooey in the middle. That's really good. That might be topping the Sally one. Oh my goodness. That was so good. It's actually very similar to the Sally's recipe. Texture wise, it has that crispy outside and it has like the softer, gooier center. For Broma's, I found the flavor to be better because I think of the coffee flavor in there. I think that really helps bring the chocolate out, and it helps the chocolate chips in between seem sweeter than they are. So I know I rated Sally's 9.5, but I think I might have to bring that down a bit to like a 9.2, and I'm gonna rate this one a 9.5 because it's just perfect. Like the size is perfect, the rise was perfect, and it's crispy on the outside and perfectly gooey in the middle, and the flavor is just unbeatable. Okay, I think it's gonna be hard to top that cookie. That was a really good cookie. But next up, we've got John's cookie. This is from John Kanow, the one-off that I found in my Google search. And this cookie is a lot smaller. It's more comparable to the size of Sally's cookie, but it does have that same crispy edge. So I'm hoping the inside is also gooey. Let's break it open. They all look pretty similar, to be honest. I think that just proves the importance of creaming together the butter and the sugar, because that is what gives you this crispy edge. Again, that's a very good cookie. It's a chocolate cookie, so it's gonna be good no matter what. And the texture is, again, very similar to all the ones before it. It has that crispy outside, has a gooey inside. It's almost perfect. I think in terms of flavor, I find it to be similar to Sally's cookie because I think they both have that white sugar element to it, so it kind of takes away from the richness of the cookie. But this one does have more brown sugar than the one from Sally, so I find it to be more rich. But overall, I still prefer Broma's because I think this one has just brown sugar and it has no white sugar, and that really adds this richness that you can't find from white sugar. Again, this is a really good cookie. I would just rate it a 9.3 because I think that having more brown sugar in comparison to Sally's is a better move. But it's so good still. Definitely needed that. Last but not least, we have my fail. So this one is the one that had too much margarine in it. It's really thin. It's like paper thin. Let's break it open. Not gonna lie, I am scared to try this one because, well, it doesn't look very appetizing, does it? But I think the center part could be somewhat good. Obviously it's not good, but it does feel feels very greasy. I think because of all the extra fat, the bottom has actually become really crispy. Like if you were to burn cheese. I mean, it's a really soft cookie, I'm not gonna lie. It's super soft because of all that extra fat. It kind of just tastes like cooked dough instead of a cookie. And it is super salty. Definitely a fail. I'm probably gonna have to remake that one day with the right amount of margarine and truly test the effect of margarine because I didn't get to do that properly today. Now it's time for the final rankings. I'm sure we know this. I'm gonna give the #1 spot to Broma Bakery. I really loved that cookie. It was a great size. The coffee flavor really helped bring out the chocolate, and having just brown sugar in the dough made it so much gooier. The second spot I'm gonna give to the recipe authored by John Cannell. The cookie had a perfect texture and the chocolate flavor was definitely there. I just wish it had been bigger. But since the ratio of brown to white sugar leaned more brown in John's recipe, I liked the inside of the cookie more. I'm gonna give the #3 spot to Sally's Baking Addiction. It's a solid cookie, it's really good. I just found that I liked it less compared to the other ones. And sadly, I'm gonna give the #4 spot to the recipe by All Recipes. I think it could have been a great recipe. The flavor of the dough was definitely there, but because I added too much margarine, the cookie was barely even a cookie. I will say though, that there's something to be said about the thinness of that cookie, because while it wasn't as perfect as the other ones, it was still a good texture. Going into this test, I thought all 4 recipes would turn out pretty similar, but after making and tasting them side by side, I was surprised by how much small differences in the recipes affected the final cookies. I came away with a much better understanding of what creates the texture and flavor I'm searching for, and honestly now, I just have an excuse to bake even more cookies. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and feel free to comment down below what videos you'd like to see next time.